Hello and welcome to the Who Asked for This podcast, the topical and nonsensical podcast, hosted by me, John, and I've got back with me here today, Tom. You all right, Tom?
You all right, John? I'm back again. Nice to be back.
Okay, so last time we were a bit more on the negative side. We were doing our overrated artists, but we're going to give some love to what we deem as underrated artists today.
Yeah, underrated artists. I've compiled a brief list. I feel like this list could be so much bigger than the overrated artists, but let's see what you think on that front. Would you like me to just jump straight in and get down to it?
Yeah, hit me with your first band, man.
I'll hit you with my rhythm stick, and that rhythm stick is going to be, and this is a bit of a controversial choice on the underrated bands. A lot of people put these on the overrated scale. Radiohead.
You've kind of more recently gone on quite a big Radiohead dive, haven't you? I think you've really started getting into them quite a lot at the moment, getting all their albums on vinyl and stuff. That did encourage me to get one myself. I listened to the Bends, and for the most part, I quite enjoyed it. They seem to me like a musician's band and a bit of an artist's artist in a way. People who are really like clued up on their music and musicians themselves seem to really love and appreciate the band. But I do think at the same time they do seem to have a pretty huge fan base. You know, they've done stuff like headline Glastonbury Festival and the likes as well. So I don't quite agree that. I think I'd probably say they were like perfectly rated, but your it's in your corner, man. You fight their battle for them, please.
Okay, so my take on it, I've always been a Radiohead fan, and I have gotten into them massively in the years since. They're one of those bands that they have a very elitist almost fan base. They are a band for musicians, so they're commonly known for their 90s. The three albums, like you said, The Bends was the second album. They're commonly known for the three albums that they released in the 90s, which are the radio-friendly albums.
Yeah.
And it got less and less radio-friendly as it went on. Paranoid, Android, and OK Computer. The OK Computer album is lauded as like one of the best albums ever written, and to some degree, possibly overrated. They know what they're doing. They make really good music. They hit a peak. I think Tom York had something of a mental breakdown, couldn't deal with what was going on. After all of that, released Kid A, which is, as I'm a big fan of electronic music, and Kid A is an electronic album. They redefined their fan base. They redefined their entire music by completely changing genres at the peak of their powers, and they killed it. Kid A is one of my favourite albums, if not my favourite album of all time. It sends me to a different place. They're not everyone's cup of tea. They are absolutely a musician's band. They make music for music people, and Tom York has obviously gone on to do that with The Smile as well. The In Rainbows album that they released, just they kept evolving and redefining their style and changing what they were doing production wise as well. But I think what's even more impressive is when you delve into it and go, yeah, Radio have some good songs, and then some of their albums you need to listen to about 3 or 4 times before you start getting it. The way the songs are written, they're not conventional. There's some drum patterns that almost don't make sense. They're difficult to play along with. They're really hard to play along with. And then some stuff's really easy. And the chord progressions where the chords jump to doesn't make sense. It's all so well, cleverly written, but it doesn't always hit people's musical palates. Like I said, music for musicians. What really hits you, though, is when you see them live. I've not seen them live in person, but if you look at their live footage, they play very difficult music to play effortlessly. They make stuff that is very hard and very difficult to play, especially as an ensemble, incredibly easy. They make it look so easy. And Tom York switches instruments. He sings while he's playing some complicated riffs. It's incredible to watch, and I admire them. And the more you delve into the Radiohead rabbit hole, the worse it gets, or the better it gets. But that's all I'll say on it. But I think for a band that are so popular and have such an avid fan base, I still think their musical ability is ridiculously underrated.
I think I would agree to a certain point on the fact of like considering how popular and how much of a household name they are. I think a lot of people who listen to the certain parts of their discography, it's kind of like, if you can imagine, like the iceberg, like they're very surface water on their discography. Like from my experience, I've only really heard of what gets played on the radio. So Creep, obviously, and then the likes of like High and Dry and not Paranoid, Karma Police and stuff like that.
All great songs.
I picked up that Benz album. I listened to it and I was like, I enjoyed that. There was a couple of songs that I really liked. I went, oh, this song's amazing. I love that. I think the problem I've with them and some artists like that is I'm not the biggest arty-farty fan. Like, as you say, when they go into all these complex music writing techniques and skills and stuff like that, that's all well and good, but for me, it's like, is the hook still there? Is this still catchy? Is this still something I'm going to enjoy listening? Or am I just sitting there trying to appreciate the chord he's just played, or the drum pattern, or the time signature and stuff like that? I think stuff like that isn't very accessible to your average kind of, music listener or enjoying stuff like that. They do bring a level of kind of elitism to them, as you say. Like, I think to even an extent they're somewhat gatekept sometimes. You definitely have a point on the terms of they're underrated, and their later catalogue is underrated. And I would probably say their kind of spin-off side, next project, The Smile, as you brought up, is definitely underrated, because until you brought them up to me, I'd never heard of them before. I think that's kind of where I stand there.
Yeah, they also had the look of, like I said, when they changed their style, they were under a record label. They were under, at the time, I think it was like EMI, and they afforded them the ability to completely change their sound and not sacrifice, anything from a financial standpoint from a record company. Yeah. And they've always worked with the producer, Nigel Godrich. They've done everything with him. So he's always been described as like the sixth member of Radiohead. So they've had that as well. They've had that level of consistency. I don't know. Like I said, there is the issue that if the fan base can be regarded as elitist, and the word genius gets bandied about, especially in music, far too often. And I'm not going to use it, but I'm going to say that if I was to use it and throw it about, Radiohead will come damn close.
As I say, I agree in some bits, and other bits I kind of don't, because I do think they are a household name. But do you want to hit us with another band, please?
Yes. So I did speak about this artist in the last podcast we did. It's a reggae artist called Toots and the Maytals, and they were from, I believe, the 1960s, and they were a reggae group that predated your Bob Marleys, and they pretty much defined, and they defined reggae. They were one of the first ever reggae acts. They brought that genre to the mainstream, and still to this day, you'll hear songs like Pressure Drop and 54, 56, That's My Number. You may not know the titles, but you will definitely recognise the beats, the rhythm, and they're in popular music. I saw it last year. Pressure Drop was on Match of the Day, and they're so instilled in modern culture. But when people say reggae, you think of Bob Marley, don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't have a clue who they are. I've never heard that name before. I think reggae was a very niche genre of music.
But that's the reason for the underrated, that you haven't heard them, and they predated Bob Marley. Yeah. They gave Bob Marley the canvas to work what he worked on.
They walked so he could run, is kind of the saying.
Yeah.
The whole standing on the shoulders of giants. As I say, I'm afraid I can't give you much feedback on that, mate. I'm going to have to go over your word on that. The fact that I haven't heard them, again, I'm not the biggest reggae listener, but I like the odd Bob Marley track, so yeah, I'll give you that. That is definitely an unrated band artist.
Yeah, I'll take that. Next one, I'm going to delve into another one of John's favourite music genres, hip-hop. And again, someone we listened to earlier on today, I think. MF Doom, which I think the MF stands for Metal Fingers, which is not relevant whatsoever. You are familiar with, John? Am I right?
I am pretty much unfamiliar with him, besides, obviously, when he died, I saw his name kind of plastered all over like Twitter and other social media accounts and stuff like that. Pretty much everyone going on about how he was one of the greatest of all time and all that. Never heard of him. Again, unfortunately, hip hop is kind of out my wheelhouse. Not really something I actively go out and listen to. So I will have to again take your word on that. I think, like you said to me previously about artists and stuff like that, I think sometimes you do have that case where people don't understand how much of an influence certain artists bring on music and other artists, in fact, and in a way that does kind of make them underrated. So again, based on the fact that I literally didn't hear about him until his unfortunate passing, I'll have to agree with you there and give it an underrated.
Okie doke. Yeah, it's just more the fact that he influenced so many popular hip hop artists, and the stuff he did was groundbreaking, really, really unique, and you knew it was him when you could hear his voice and go, yeah, that's Doom. Yeah, really iconic as well. He wore the Doctor Doom mask, very, very strange, but yeah, really iconic. Not much more I can say, really. It got a lot of popularity after his passing, sadly, and I contribute to that. I didn't really give him much of a listen prior to his passing. I was aware of him and I had heard him, but I gave him much more time after he passed. But yeah, massively underrated.
There was a big kind of thing a couple of years back where SoundCloud rap was becoming like this big trend. And I think what was happening was these artists were on such a massive burnout that unfortunately they would die before their music like kind of hit a lot of ears. And then I know, for example, one was like Juice WRLD and various other artists like that. I think that was a bit of a trend a few years ago where, unfortunately they were burning too bright. And by the time that, their music got appreciated, they unfortunately went around to kind of hear it, similar to Van Gogh.
As opposed to Van Stay. All right, so next one I've got, it's a tough one because I don't know how much Bon Iver you listen to.
Not very at all. I know him from his features more than his actual I'm guessing they're a band. I know them from their features more than their actual own music. I know them from the sample that was used from them in the Kanye West song Lost in the Woods, is it called? And I know them from their features with Taylor Swift on the Folklore and Evermore albums.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot. The Justin Vernon, who is his stage name is Bon Iver, gets that much traction. So I guess not particularly underrated. Maybe I've got him on the wrong list. But his band, especially, are really talented. His drummer is a man called Sean Carey, who has a blistering solo career. Who's got about 4 studio albums, really beautiful music. Similar in line to Bon Iver, there's a Welsh artist called Novo Amor, who very similar solo artist, beautiful acoustic, ambient, otherworld kind of music. I can't explain it. It's down as alternative, but that's such a broad demographic. But I'd recommend you to check them out. I've only briefly touched on them because there's a lot I could delve into. I'm not going to because that's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
So I'll jump straight in with my next one, which I could talk about for a long, long time. Funkadelic, Parliament, Funkadelic from the 70s. Your thoughts?
I'm aware these exist, so that's something at least. I know, obviously, they were huge influences on one of mine and your own favourite bands, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and for that alone, I've got to give a bit of gratitude and a bit of respect. I think funk as a genre, I love it when it's like infused into stuff, but as a kind of standalone genre, I think kind of similar to disco. Really, it's a bit of a thing of the past that is great when it's incorporated, but kind of on its own. It's not everyone's cup of tea, and I get that, to be honest.
I understand what you mean about the time capsule side of it. I think as an institution, George Clinton as a producer and his whole Parliament Funkadelic movement of the 70s jumped into the 80s as well. Huge, massive influence on so many artists, and not many people know who George Clinton is in popular music, which is mind-blowing to me because he's so influential on so many people, especially in America. Funk, soul, and even to a point, he influenced the entire hip-hop movement. Dr. Dre sampled Funkadelic. So much hip-hop came from funk samples and funk sounds, even to the point now I've been lucky enough to see Funkadelic live twice with George Clinton, he's in his 80s now, dear God, and he's still rocking it. But modern Funkadelic is very hip hop based. They still have the guitar solos and the crazy over the top show of people on stilts and insanity, but there's a lot of hip hop, which is the modern take on it.
Yeah.
Over the 70s disco funk Bootsy Collins style. But from what they've done for music, I think is so underrated. And they're largely forgotten.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, not my wheelhouse. Don't know too much of it myself, but as you say, I kind of think funk is such like a fundamental base kind of stone to work upon, and it's incorporated in everything. Like everything's got to have a groove, everything's got to have a rhythm, and funk is obviously the king of that. What it's kind of brought into music, obviously with hip hop and rap, is just you can't disagree that is just such a massive impact on modern music and how music is today.
Dr. Dre's The Chronic album, which came out in the mid-early 90s, that album would not exist if it were not for Funkadelic, because of the amount of samples that were used and were taken. Dr. Dre's earlier stints in mid-80s sampled so much funk. Hip-hop would not exist as it does today without funk. I'm gonna drop an name that you know, Dandy Warhols. Okay, so they did a song called Bohemian Like You that went massive, huge in the UK.
Yeah, I'm onto that. Yeah.
Of a phone advert. Are still going to this day. Fantastic rock psychedelic group. Thought it worth your time.
That's a whole topic that kind of can be touched on in its own right, is kind of the concept of the one hit wonder, and how in a way obviously it can bring a band to fame, it can get you notoriety, it can get you fame and fortune, but at the same time it can also be the death kiss of you, and it can be the end of you. Like obviously Blair are not a one hit wonder, but it's funny because I was watching a video today about Song 2 and how basically it was written purely as kind of like a bit of a piss take and a mick take and a mockery of grunge and Nirvana's Smell Like Teen Spirit, which we mentioned on previous episode.
There they go, cropping back up again.
That's their biggest hit. You've got to say hands down that is their biggest hit, and that does not represent the band that they are. And I think sometimes that's the case with one hit wonders. You know, you do a song that's a bit different from what you usually do. Next thing, it's what you're known as, and it's not always representative of who the band or artist are.
No, and Dandy Warhols have got such a varying style. Like they've got so many different strings to the bow. They've done electronic, they've done country. There's all kinds of stuff, and that Bohemian Like You song, I guarantee you, if you listen to that song and listen to the album 12 Hymns from Urban Bohemia, I think, or 13, sorry, from Urban Bohemia, the album that's off, no other song sounds like that song. No other song.
Yeah, I think one of the bands I've got in mind that I'm going to bring up soon is kind of put in similar trappings where they're kind of known for the songs that I would not like them to be known for, if that makes sense.
Me to finish my list.
I want you to finish your little cute baby list, please.
Okay, thank you. If that's okay. A big fan of electronic music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aphex Twin. I was going to throw in there, but I think Aphex Twin is a big enough name to not be underrated.
I know them, so that says enough.
Yes, exactly. Fortet, English electronic artist, phenomenal. Absolute game changer. Luke Vibert, again, another, I think, Cornwall-based acid, fantastic electronic artist, Luke Vibert. So versatile, so many different styles of electronic music that has influenced modern electronic music to this day. Did a great album under the name Plug. And two guys from Scotland called Boards of Canada. Now, they were massive in the late 90s. And you will know some of their stuff from adverts and things like that. For example, like you find a lot of that with electronic music, like Massive Attack. Yeah. You know, a lot of their stuff is on like adverts and backing. Boards of Canada would sample a lot of 70s TV and things like that. And I know you haven't got much input on the electronic genre, so I'm going to keep that short and sweet. But I've got a big love for electronic, and they're my big takes on it. And my last one I'm going to throw in. Not electronic, it's punk, and I'm assuming you know who he is. G.G. Allen.
Oh, I am well aware, G.G. Allen. He's a colourful character, from my knowledge.
I'm going to justify. I'm not saying his music is underrated because I don't think there was a lot of talent there, really. But I think in terms of being, or people use the term punk in loads of different ways. I think G.G. Allen was probably the most authentic punk there has ever been. Anti-establishment. Yeah. Didn't give a fuck, did what he wanted, tried to offend everyone and the establishment, and did not care. And 100%, G.G. Allen was the ultimate punk. Whether I agreed with some of the stuff he did is not what I'm saying. But I think if anyone epitomizes punk, just Google him. Just Google G.G. Allen and you will see the punk in a picture.
I can completely get down with the whole concept of going against, swimming up the stream, and being like a controversial figure, and I think punk should stand for that, and I think that's something that's kind of gone in more modern sense of punk is like the true kind of battle against like conforming and conformality, if that's the right word.
Yeah. Like the James did it well in the 1980s. Their GI album is a perfect punk album in my eyes of what original like American punk was. G.G. Allen was just like a continuation of that in one human being.
Recommend looking him up and doing a bit of research on him, because he is a character. I know that much.
It was a character, all right. Right, John, that's my comprehensive list exhausted.
That was very nice, Tom. I enjoyed that very much. I felt like you really threw out some wild cards there. Obviously, I've got 3 I'd like to roll out, and to be honest, I think in comparison, you really threw out some bands that not a lot of people have heard of. I think these bands are ones that a lot of people have heard of. I think the first one is similar to kind of what you said with Radiohead, and another one where they're kind of known more for what they, they're more kind of well-known stuff, and they're not appreciated for some of their lesser-known stuff. And this may sound a bit wacky, but hear me out. The first underrated band I'm going to throw out is The Cure.
Underrated, okay.
Underrated. Now, when a lot of people think of The Cure, they're going to go straight to Love Cats, or even Friday I'm in Love, even just like Heaven, the hits and stuff like that. But they've got quite a vast catalogue where, similar to kind of other bands that we've mentioned, they've really kind of changed and adapted and gone through various different kind of states as a band, from their kind of early post-punk, kind of really eerie kind of Joy Division-esque sound, to obviously the more kind of signature 80s sound, the alternative new wave sound that you hear. And then they've delved into various things where you've got the more kind of moody like ambient kind of sounds and albums like Disintegration. You've got kind of your more generic rock album like Wish. You're even going into areas of like jazz and swing with Wild Mood Swings. I think they're a band that, like, a lot of people only just kind of scratch the surface on and don't really quite appreciate, how deep you can kind of dive into their work and their discography.
You can fall down the rabbit hole with them.
You can definitely fall down a rabbit hole with them.
I've delved, and I like and I appreciate The Cure. I do like them. They're just one of those artists that, nothing against them whatsoever, they just don't excite me quite enough. I like Disintegration, great album. I like Wish, great album, but it just, on a personal level, doesn't excite me. But I understand that there's layers to them, and they have changed and they have evolved. And I feel like musical evolving is a massive part of what makes a good artist.
I think if you go back to our overrated episode, I think the problem we have with most of them bands is they never changed or strayed too far from the path. Sometimes that isn't always necessarily like a bad thing. Sometimes that's fine. You know what you're getting, and that's good. But I feel once you go on for long enough, it kind of gets to the point where it's like, if you're not bringing anything new to the table, is it really worth bringing anything to the table? And I think that's where some of the bands that we brought up in the overrated episode definitely suffer from, where the band becomes a brand.
And their musical style stagnates. There's nothing new. There's nothing original. They're just rehashing and kind of hoping for, like, if they were to change, they would be alienating their fan base.
The next Rolling Stones album started like having hip hop features.
The fan base would fall off, or the hardcores would obviously kick up a stink about it. And at what point do they lose their musical their creativity and their input? Like, at what point are they stopping doing that? Do they even want to do that? Are they forcing the point and being told that they can't do that? Obviously, different artists vary. Like I pointed out, Radiohead, when they did Kid A and went from alt rock band to electronic, where most of the songs didn't even have guitars in, they were afforded that luxury by their record company, which I'm sure bands like the Rolling Stones and the Foo Fighters, I'm pretty sure would not be afforded that luxury.
The Cure, underrated, in my opinion. Do you think they're underrated, or do you just think they are rated as what they are? Because to be fair, again, going back to the whole musicians, artist, the Cure are a very well-known band, and if you listen to a lot of like bands' influences and stuff like that, their name is often brought up. So the underrated badge, don't think can fully apply, but I definitely think some of their work is very underrated and underappreciated as a whole.
I see where you're coming from, and I appreciate and respect that opinion. My personal view on it is I think they're where they kind of should be, that they are a popular act and that they deserve the fame and the popularity, but I don't think they deserve the mega stardom. If that makes sense. That sounds quite cruel, but again, I'm not a super fan enough. I'm not a big enough fan to really put them on that pedestal. So I think they're where they deserve to be, but that's from someone that isn't a hardcore.
That's fine, and in a way, I wouldn't want them to be like that. You know, not I don't want to gatekeep music or keep it away from people. You know, I want as many ears on it as possible. But you know, I like that it's niche. I like that it's a bit kind of more out there. So my second band, which I know you are a fan of, I believe, is Churches.
With a V.
With a V. I think.
Yeah, I like Churches.
For how good they are, they're not. They're well known. They have songs that they get fairly good radio play and stuff like that. But for how good they are, I don't think they're. I think, to be honest, they should be the headliners of like Leeds and Reading Festival. I think they should be higher up on the slots. Whereas at the moment they're still kind of playing secondary, smaller stages and stuff like that. They're still playing the academies and not the arenas. I think they are worthy of that kind of like step up, and I don't think they're getting enough ears on them. So in that kind of aspect, I would rate them as underrated.
I really love what they do. I love their latest album. What was the name of the latest album, John? Do you remember what it was called?
Screen Violence.
Screen Violence, fantastic album. What I like is that they're very of the time currently. So they do a lot of synth. It's like synth rock, synth punk, pop kind of stuff. Also really value, and I haven't mentioned this, really value singers that sing in their own accent. And obviously the singer from Churches, don't know her name, but Lauren sings in a Scottish accent, and that is beautiful to me, because that you're not Americanizing your voice. It that bugs me, something rotten. But that's a different story for a different day. But I think they're very of the time. I agree they could play bigger slots. I agree they probably should play bigger slots. Make really catchy songs. Clearly very talented at what they do. My only question would be, where would they go? So from when they started to now, there's a level of some evolving. Where do they go from where they are now? I just don't know what more they could do to change the world, if you get me. But I love what they are.
To be honest, I haven't really got an answer for you there. I would probably ask the same question myself, but I just feel like should get more love than they get in that kind of aspect. Like they should be higher up on the festival slots, and they should be packing out bigger venues, I think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I agree. 100% massively underrated. Totally.
And my third, again, you know, mine in comparison to yours are like, you know, these are all pretty well-known big bands, but I kind of feel like they're underrated or not really given enough appreciation for what they've done in music. My third one is Placebo.
Placebo. Yep, I know Placebo.
Again, most people know them, most people have heard the songs on the radio, but I think the kind of back catalogue, for a band that have released such big songs as they have, the fact that when I go to their gigs, I can get right up to the bar at the stage without a single bit of stress or worry, just goes to show that they're not bringing in the audience that I think they should be. Now, to be fair, on a critical aspect, the last few albums haven't really hit the highs that they previously did, but I would definitely put them in my top 5 favourite bands, hands down. I can't really quite explain what it is about them that makes them great, but I think they're great, and the music's great, but I kind of feel like, you know, they're kind of this trapped in amber band that everyone remembers them from kind of like the 90s and the early 2000s, and people just aren't really keeping track of them anymore, or they're not really kind of coming up in general kind of conversation, or they've kind of, I think the best way to put it is they've kind of lost a bit of relevancy. The fan base has dwindled, and I don't know. I just think they should get like a bit more love and a bit more appreciation for what they are and what they've done.
I see where you're coming from. I think if I didn't know you, John, and I know you're a big Placebo fan, if I didn't know you, I wouldn't know Placebo was still going. I'll put it that way. I would not be aware that they're still going. I remember them from the late 90s. I remember knowing and kind of liking 2 or 3 songs, maybe. Not liking them enough to go any further than to delve. I know there was a lot of androgyny with the lead singer, with the gender, like very feminine. And I feel like that would probably go a hell of a long way in the modern age. Obviously, time's passed and they may not dress or sound like that anymore. I don't know. I haven't listened to Placebo anything really since the stuff in the 90s that was popular on like Kerrang. But I'll have to take your word for it that they're massively underrated. They're still going. They've clearly still got a love for the music. It's a shame that the fan base hasn't quite carried on to the peak that it was in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Because I was aware that they were a massively well-followed band. I just never followed them, but I appreciate them.
The way I feel about it is I kind of feel like, obviously we're kind of like an aging generation now, we're well into our adulthood and stuff. Obviously, like social media trends and how some bands have kind of had a bit of a revival in recent years, especially on the likes like TikTok and stuff like that. I kind of feel like stuff like the LGBTQ communities and stuff would eat Placebo up. Like they would love it, but I just don't think it's getting to their ears. And I think that is a bit of a shame because, as you say, Brian Molko, if I'm saying his second name right there, was very kind of iconic in kind of like his on stage kind of cross dressing, that
very androgynous.
Yeah, that kind of gender bending kind of the way he did it, and there was always a lot of mystery behind it and a lot of like questions into kind of like the sexuality, and then you look into the songs and I think they were kind of quite revolutionary at their time for being very open on certain subjects and stuff like that. And I just feel like, similar to churches and stuff like that, I just feel like they should have a bit more love, and I would like to see them get more of a modern revival from kind of a younger generation.
You could say that they were a band that were painfully ahead of their time. That if they'd have come out a few years later, they'd have maybe hit it off a lot bigger, because they had a good following back in the day. Yeah. At their peak, they had a really good following, but yeah, maybe ahead of the time.
Yeah, I think that can be a problem sometimes with some artists. So they're my 3 anyway. There's none others I can think of on the... Oh, one last seriously underrated band, man. Seriously underrated. You've probably never heard of these, but Guns N' Roses.
There you go.
I'm messing.
Wow. Yeah. They should have been in the other list on the last one.
I would have defended them a bit there, to be honest, especially Chinese Democracy. But I think that's a story for another time, because I could really say a lot about that.
You could probably make an entire podcast just on that album, to be honest.
I think I might just do that, to be honest. Anyway, that has been a nice, shorter, sweeter episode from us, Tom.
Thank you very much, John, for having me.
It's been a pleasure, my friend, and I hope to have you on again soon. Thanks for listening. If you're still listening at this point, please follow me on socials, the Who Asked for This podcast, and look forward to more episodes soon. Goodbye.